In this task, you learned 6 more terms. Let's review them. Comparable properties are those properties which are identical to or are sufficiently similar to the subject property as to warrant comparison. The past sales of these comparable properties or their current asking prices often form the basis for valuing the subject property. Adjustments to value may have to be made if there are differences in the value characteristics between the comparable property and the subject property. The bundle of rights associated with the property represents the totality of rights of ownership accruing to the owner, such as the right to consume, display, use, discard, sell, donate, etc., the property. Where there is but a single owner, the bundle of rights belongs to one person or entity. But for property that is co-owned, the bundle of rights is shared. Appraisers must be aware of what percentage of the bundle of rights the client owns, as USPAP requires that the ownership rights be disclosed in the appraisal report. Normally it is 100%, but for co-owned property, the ownership interest will be less. The client is the party or parties who engage the appraiser for a specific assignment. The client could be an individual, a group, or some other entity. Unless requesting anonymity, the client must be identified within the appraisal report. The client is the party with whom the appraiser has an appraiser-client relationship, which includes, among other things, a requirement for confidentiality, not being an advocate, being without bias, and avoiding contingency fees. Intended users include the client as well as anyone else who will also be making use of the report. Intended users must be identified as such by the appraiser on the basis of communication with the client at the time the assignment is accepted. Appraisers must ensure that the appraisal report meets the needs of all identified intended users and not just the client. Intended users must be identified within the appraisal report. Note that just because one receives a copy of an appraiser's report in the normal course of business or because of disclosure requirements, that does not automatically make that party an intended user. Examples are the IRS for donation appraisals and insurance companies for insurance appraisals. The reason such parties do not automatically become intended users is that the appraiser cannot be aware of how or even if those parties will make use of the report, nor is the appraiser aware of what the needs of those parties are. That is, what information must be in the report in order to satisfy the needs of those parties. Scope of work is the type and the amount of work actually performed by the appraiser to arrive at his or her conclusions, and includes such things as the degree to which the property was inspected, the amount of research and analysis that was done, and the degree of assistance provided by others, if any. The scope of work must be disclosed in the appraisal report. The intended use of an appraisal is the way in which the client or other intended users will make use of the appraiser's work product. Just a few examples of intended use might include for charitable donation purposes, for acquiring insurance, for submitting a damage or loss claim, or for litigation purposes. For an appraisal assignment, knowing the intended use allows the appraiser to identify the type and definition of value to be developed. This, in turn, allows the appraiser to identify the scope of work that must be performed in order to arrive at credible assignment results.